All right, this is AP Lit, and we're talking about page 70 to about page 100 in Heart of Darkness, and the first comment was about the hollow men. I just want to point out you can find that on page 70, 71. We can come back to that. That's a really important theme in this book. Liam?
Well, it was interesting because obviously if you look at all the Heart of Darkness, it's like this area is exactly the best place to influence the people. And even in terms of like the group, were planning like a conspiracy against Kurtz because they're scared of him and what he's gonna what his ambitions are. And they're like, well, we're either gonna have to take care of him ourselves or he'll just die to this sickness. So either way, it's gonna work out for us. So I think it's just interesting that even though they're going into this place, there's still like darkness within them as well.
Okay, so they are sort of ironic that they're going into the heart of darkness, but it reminds me of Canterbury Tales. If you remember the summoner was teaching the devil how to. I don't know if you remember that the friar's tale, but the summoner was teaching the devil how to do his job, which is of course funny that somebody's worse than the devil. And here it is, these European devils were going into they hadn't seen darkness yet, and yet they're full of it themselves. Yeah, well.
I just thought it was interesting how Conrad isn't a romantic writer and how he uses so much of nature and concrete imagery to build the story up. And I just thought maybe he looked towards those romantic writers because he looked up to them because of how much nature that he uses and how the manager of the company said we can rely on nature to get rid of Kurtz if we have to. So just how much nature he incorporates, even though that
Right.
isn't his time period.
And don't forget, nature itself isn't romantic or realistic or Baroque or classical, neoclassical. Nature is what it is, and so it's what men make of it. So good point. The Romantics romanticized it, they idealized it. He doesn't, although he sees in it, there is some beauty to it, there's some mystery to it. The Romantics would love that, but there is a difference. That's a good point, yeah.
Well, the dynamic of the crew versus the passengers on the steamboat that Marlowe is on, I find very interesting. When I heard that they were cannibals as crewmen on the boat, I was like, oh, this is going to be a very chaotic section of the book. And they have, it's so surprising because they have sort of quiet dignity and they're subjecting themselves to eating this rotten hippo, which apparently was thrown off the boat long ago. And so they're starving and they are now the hollow men while carrying out their tax job complaint. And they have, they care for everybody on the boat, and when the helmsman dies, it's their friend, and they don't see it as an immediate opportunity for another meal. They see it as the death of their friend. And I think that's maybe some foreshadowing for Marlowe's change of heart in seeing that these savages aren't at all what he expected, and that the pilgrims and the other agents on the boat are the ones who have darkness.
So it raises, that's a good point, it raises who is truly civilized here. You'd think cannibalism is like the lowest level. You can't sink any lower than cannibalism, right? And yet these cannibals, and I was looking for the page number and I'll find it, because we do need to come back to that. I don't know why I didn't write that down, but let me get it for you, since it may not, I'm sure we'll bring it up again, but sorry, thought I wrote that down. The word is restraint, and I'm looking on page 100, I'm looking on page 99, so those are two places I want to write that down so I won't forget it. Restraint, yeah, there it is, page 199. So, what is restraint? What does it mean to restrain from doing something?
It's self-inflicted boundaries and limits.
Right. So I think that restraint is a hallmark of civilization. It's what separates civilized from uncivilized. uncivilized would be doing whatever your heart tells you to do, whatever you want to do. And since our heart is dark, there you go. So civilization is when people are able to restrain and control that. And these are the last people on earth, because they're also hungry cannibals. And he points out on those pages that hunger is the most, it's the most powerful of all physical urges. You can't restrain it. That's why people eat people, in some situations. They might eat family members. I mean, it's impossible to keep yourself from eating at a certain point if you're not dead first. And yet they're able to do it. And it's a mystery. And he doesn't know why. But I like what you said, that it makes you wonder who's really civilized. These cannibals are more civilized than the pilgrims who just shoot randomly. Their greed is unrestrained. They just shoot into the wilderness like that ship at the beginning of the book, lobbing shells. They're shooting at these. They can't see the natives. They're just shooting. They want to shoot everybody and anybody. So good point. When we go here, we'll go.
Well, just on the morning of the attack, when Marlowe was describing the transition from like night to morning,
Yeah.
and it's foggy in the morning, he said the fog was actually more blinding than the night, and so that stood out to me as kind of representing how we were talking about the lazy devil versus the violent devil, and how the lazy devil could even be worse because you don't think you're doing evil. So I just liked that.
And it's white fog. I thought it was interesting. The colors. I don't know if you noticed this, but after the closer they get to Kurtz, the more dreamlike, the lack of energy they get. There's just a lot of weird things going on. You can't see clearly all the things it's a darkness. But as you imagine what the heart of darkness would really be like. That's it. It gets to your mind as well as other parts of the body, the heart and things. We'll go to Karen.
So I found it interesting, the relationship between Marlowe and the company manager's assistant, the guy who's supposed to make bricks, because both of them were they were missing the thing that they had to have to do their jobs properly.
Yeah.
Because Marlowe didn't have the rivets and the guy he was missing something to make the bricks. But I found it interesting what they did with their times, because the brickmaker, he was super schemy, and he was constantly trying to figure out a way to get rid of Kurt so he can get ahead in the chain of command for the company. And Marlowe was just kind of I'm just here to go find Kurtz. That's all I really care about. And the guy was trying to find out all this information about Marlowe, about where he came from in Europe and his connections, and Marlowe didn't really care whether he found out or not because he wasn't as invested in the company. So I thought that was interesting.
I'm glad you brought up that guy. There are several examples of waiting for what? Just waiting. There's a brickmaker, but he doesn't do what he's supposed to do. And that's that's part of the theme. We're not doing what we're supposed to do. He can't fix the steamboat without the rivets. He says he didn't know what he was waiting for. He said maybe it was straw. You remember the Hebrews and Exodus. So there are lots of examples like that. Inefficiency, laziness, meaninglessness, purposelessness are all part of that kind of evil. Yeah, of course.
I had two things. But the first one, kind of going off of what Emily said, I think it's when he overhears the uncle talking to the general manager, and the general manager's complaining about this guy he thinks is stealing from the company, and uncle's like, well, nobody's really paying attention. You should probably just kill him. And I was like, I don't know. I just thought that was interesting. I thought it really kind of highlighted Emily's point a little bit. And then the other thing
And what makes it happy? He even said that Marlowe's just there to get Kurtz. And you mentioned he's happy because he got the ribbon so he can go.
It's like a little bit of purity. It's like.
Yeah. What did you say, purity?
Yeah, it's
What
like.
pure? What makes it pure?
It's kind of childlike almost.
Yeah.
He gets so excited about it. And he's not, I don't know, it's taking away a little bit from all of the, it just seems like everybody else is motivated by greed or something, skills.
He's a good example of having a purpose in front of him. And even on the way, he's too busy to notice the darkness, to notice all the stuff. He mentions that. You know, he's so occupied by the job. Even talks about the value of work. So I think that's just the opposite of the brickmaker, and which we would put in the category of the darkness. But you mentioned even, you said it's pure, it's happy work, purpose, meaning, usefulness. Those are the things that Marlowe represents, and that I think the author is also saying is part of the opposite of darkness. Without those things, you have darkness. With no purpose, no meaning, no work, life becomes meaningless. Very good, yeah. Kimberly.
I just thought it was interesting when Marlowe found the book, he was like comforted and reminded of home, and it said it made him forget the jungle and the pilgrims and the delicious sensation of having come upon something unmistakably real. So he didn't feel like he was in a dream anymore, he was like reminded of home.
And that quote, he found something real that fits into that picture that we're looking at. He loved the book. It's the most boring book you can imagine unless you were a sailor. But here in the middle of darkness, you find a book which has it even used the word singleness of purpose. Again, all of those things are the antidote in this book's view of darkness. Darkness is a lot of those other things that we just mentioned. Yeah.
I think like the mystery of Kurtz is really interesting.
Yeah.
Like Marlowe's constantly trying to like get information about him, and he's like eavesdropping on people who talk about him, and like Kurtz just keeps popping up in these situations. Like when Marlowe sees the painting of the woman, and one of the men's like, "Oh, Kurtz painted that." And it's just like the randomest things that Kurtz is involved with, and like as they're getting closer, things keep going wrong. Like there's this fog as they get closer to him, and just everything about him is so like mysterious and interesting.
I was just looking for the first time you meet Kurtz. Just summarize what you just said. I just want to make sure I'm following your.
Well, like Marlowe is constantly like trying to get information about Kurtz, and one time that really stuck out to me was when he sees the painting of the blindfolded woman with the torch in her hand, and he finds out that Kurtz painted that.
Did we talk about that painting yet? Okay, anybody, I want to talk about that, and also, we brought up last period the fact that, I know why I was looking for this, on page 125, the book ends on page 149, is the first time we see Kurtz. The first time we hear of Kurtz is, I'm trying to go back as far as I can, it's on page 51. So, 75 pages between the beginning, the first time you hear Kurtz, and so all those times he's getting information about Kurtz, but it's all hearsay. He hasn't yet met the guy, and we talked last period, how does he feel about Kurtz? Did you mention how he feels about Kurtz? How does he feel about it? I mean, does he like him? Does he hate him? You mentioned the mystery of it. Think about the way the book is written. The most important character, you're given 75 pages and you're waiting. Can you think of any other book you read like that? And can you think of another book that, like, even a character is, the main character, at least the main co-character, is you don't meet him until the book is almost over, yeah.
The Bible.
Well, who would be that?
Jesus.
Oh, well, okay, so you're waiting for Jesus to come in all the Old Testament, yeah. And I made this example, give me a chance to plug another book. You ever heard of Ayn Rand? Well, hopefully you will. Ayn Rand, 1930s-ish, she was an American citizen, I believe, but she was Russian. And she wrote about one thing. She wrote a lot of books, but she wrote about one thing, capitalism. And she was a super, uber, ultra, hyper, whatever word you want to use, capitalist. And so all her books had to do with, were basically very simple, capitalism versus socialism. So if you're interested, big thick books like that, Atlas Shrugged, The Fountainhead. Well, Atlas Shrugged is about a group of men in a kind of more socialist society that check out. All the entrepreneurs in society check out. They don't know where they are. They're actually going to start their own little world up in the Rocky Mountains somewhere. It takes place in America. But the first sentence of Atlas Shrugged is this: who is John Galt? And I don't remember when you finally meet John Galt, but that becomes, he's the kind of leader of the capitalists. Well, several years ago, I was driving in Westridge to the shopping center, Battleground, and I looked, there was a house on the right, and had this sign, like, a political sign type sign, said, who is John Galt? And I looked at my wife and said, that's interesting, because John Galt, among some people, has become that image or that symbol of capitalism and what's increasingly a socialist world. But the whole book is kind of based on who is he, when do you meet him? So it's a great way to write a book. I really love that because it certainly creates the interest. And and we can get to, but the question you need to think about, how does he feel about it? Does he like him or does he not like him? Is he neutral about him or does he hate him? Because we mentioned all the people around him have different views of him, and all he gets is hearsay. But he seems to kind of interested, inquisitive. He wants to know about him. But we pointed out that he kind of likes him, even though he's never met him, because all the people he is around are sorry people. They're weak, they're sorry, they're inefficient, and so Kurtz begins to look better and better. Even evil sometimes looks better than meaninglessness. Even somebody who's doing something bad, actually, at least he's smart. It's almost like, I don't like what you're doing, but you're better than these people. They're not accomplishing anything. So I just think that's an interesting view of it. Yeah.
Well, I just like the effect that Kurtz has on everyone around him. Like everyone's thoughts seem like consumed by Kurtz. Like you were saying, like either people hate him or people love him, or people are just neutral. But everything they think about is Kurtz. And like I guess the physical representation of that is like when Marlowe is on the ship looking for Kurtz, like the fog. It all consumes the ship and they can't see where they're going. And like the quote you had on the place, like where the forest consumes all of them.
Yeah.
When they're going into the heart of darkness. I'm assuming that Kurtz is that heart of the darkness that everybody's so consumed by.
And again, I don't know if admire is the right word, but don't you kind of admire somebody who can have that much impact on that many people? Like everybody is fascinated by Kurtz. And we need to answer that question. We may not be able to do it today, but we need to put together a list of the characteristics of Kurtz. I don't think any of them are untrue. Even though they're hearsay, they actually turn out to be all true. He's a very complicated person, and that makes him a great character. He's not just one way or the other. Avery.
This is similar to what some people have already said, but I thought it was really interesting to see the contrast between Marlowe's reaction to like the white crewmen on his ship versus the African natives, and just how he kept talking about how the white men seemed like really lazy, and he always found a pride in himself about having like a really great work ethic.
Yeah.
So he was disappointed in the men in the crew, but then like before seeing African natives, he was like worried about them thinking they were gonna be like not human. But then he ended up being like surprised and seeing that he did find humanness in them. So I just thought it was interesting to see the contrast.
And who is his favorite person among the crew? Remember the helmsman, the guy that steered the ship, and when he died, he was upset about that. And why did he like him? He admired their restraint. He was also a cannibal, I guess. I don't know if he was, but do you remember why he liked him? Because he was useful. He could do something. And I bet if you thought about it halfway, you all are successful students. you get things done. Don't you like people that are useful? Don't you, there's something about you have this thing about people that are not useful, they're not helping at all, they're not getting anything done. I mean, you folks are achievers. I admire that. And I think most people, and certainly Marlo does, the helmsman got things, he could do something, and he did it well. Clay.
I just find it kind of interesting that whenever company members are talking about Kurtz or other people, they're like judging them based on like their value to the company itself, kind of like the practicality of that, which is a contrast to later when they're actually like when they're going down the river and they stop at the hut and they're different than Marlo because Marlo stops and he like looks at the boat and then they all just get the wood and get back on the boat while he's still stuck there and then he gets back there with still on the boat. So it's just that contrast between the practicality of the company and Marlo's own personal goals.
And Marlo's what?
Own personal goals of getting.
Yes. And we would argue that their goals are pretty small. The greed, ivory, that's it. Marlo is about bigger things, you know, like the value of work. Either one of you, Jason, McKinney.
So I thought was interesting was how with the fight, where the helmsman died, the natives were still on the side of the ship, like that was some real loyalty because they were sort of killing their own like countrymen if you think about it, because it was natives versus natives
Yeah.
in that fight as well. So I thought it was really interesting that the natives had that loyalty to Marlo and the ship and all that stuff, which sort of shows how they are less savage than they're being made out to be.
Yeah, and just because you are a native African, it's not a monolithic thing. You know, there are segments and groups like there are in every group that war, that ally. You know, in other words, it's not monolithic. Everybody doesn't think and feel the same way about it, which that's important to know. Yes.
This goes along with what you're talking about with Avery, but like I think it's very interesting. Like Marlo clearly likes the useful people, but I think that characteristic of his personality is very different from like his curious, like I don't want to say boy-like nature, but like he's very interested in Kurtz and like he wants to discover everything. So I think that like provides like he's very adult. Like he's an adult clearly because he wants people to be useful and he wants them to work hard and like all that stuff. But he's also like I think still has like a childish curiosity and wants to know everything.
Are you saying maybe that's a good combination?
Yeah.
You know, that, yeah, you work like an adult, you gotta get up at 8 in the morning and you work till 9. That's a short day. Work at 9 at night. You know how to do that, but you haven't lost that desire for more, to learn more, or the inquisitiveness. So, you're saying Marlo is like that. I think maybe Kurtz has a little of that too. Yeah.
Sort of off of that, I think Marlo's motivations are kind of strange because he comes to the Congo like on the because he wants to have an adventure basically. He wants to explore and go to places he's never been before, and then he sort of realizes as he gets to like farther along the river that like it's not like he expected it to be. Like it's much more corrupted and like evil than he expected it to be, even though he already had like a pessimistic view of like imperialism in general, but he continues anyway, basically, and he I think he understands that by the way they refer to Kurtz as like the best of them, or like, you know, they sort of deify him. I think he realizes that Kurtz has to be sort of the worst of everyone at the stations, right? Like Kurtz is like the most evil, basically, and I think he realizes that, but he still wants to go discover like what his story is. Like he wants to go see like what Kurtz does and why he does it.
He's not afraid of him.
Yeah, I think it's kind of strange how Marlo like doesn't care about his own like safety. Really, it doesn't seem like he cares very much about like dying or anything.
Yeah, I think Kurtz is a really interesting character. Think about people that stand out, people that get things done, people that are really smarter than other people. Maybe they're harder working, they're more talented. They kind of stand above. This is Kurtz. They stand out. They're not ordinary. And people hate extraordinary people, for good or bad. They hate people like that because you're you know, the herd is here and you're out here. And that's, again, something Ayn Rand, she wrote a book, The Fountainhead, about an architect, a super good architect, and I've never read it, I've seen the movie, and I've read Atlas Shrugged, but he doesn't join a corporation, he doesn't join a union, he doesn't, it's like, he's one of a kind, and he's doing it his way, and against what everybody else wants, and he accomplishes it. That's sort of the picture. Kurtz is like that. Did you have something?
Yeah, this isn't about that. But I was
That's
just gonna say that I liked how like the mystery of the characters and like the curiosity and the conspiracy about Kurtz matched the mystery of the setting and like how he described the setting. Because he describes like going into the wilderness and traveling up the river as like traveling back to the beginnings of the world. But then he also says it's like he says it's unrestful and a noisy dream, and it's just like this mysterious stillness, and it's like I love how all of the setting kind of correlates with what's going on, and so it makes it, I think, a more interesting read, just because the mystery of the plot and everyone's curiosity and what's going on in all this conspiracy, and then you also have just they don't really know where they are, and the setting is just the same, and so
That's good analysis. You're saying that good writing, good literature, everything works together. If the setting contradicted the plot, that wouldn't be a very effective novel. So, but it doesn't. And think about it. What if evil were palpable? You know, what if you could feel it, smell it? It's more like feel it. You know, it's like this is evil. That's what's going on here, but it's not in what you expect. I mean, evil would look like the pit of hell with screaming and all that stuff. It's a different view of evil, just as evil. It's the darkness, it's the fog, it's the laziness and all that. You did a really good job. We have a few minutes. I want to give you a couple other places, so we may not have to come back to this particular section. We're going to read The Hollow Men by is that T.S. Eliot? I think it is. Because he actually dedicates, well, part of the subtitle of the poem, The Hollow Men by Eliot, is to Kurtz. He mentions Kurtz in there. So Part of Darkness was written apparently before The Hollow Men. What a hollow man, what is that an effective metaphor? What would a hollow man, like this guy, remember the guy, he first thought of it, he was the manager. He had no talent. He had no stomach. This guy, to be able, he never gets sick. You gotta have, you gotta have intestines and you gotta have internal organs to get sick. Of course he does, but figuratively, he must not have a stomach. He who has no stomach to this fight, remember that? We're doing that. He must not have a stomach, so he's hollow. What's that image trying to tell us about darkness or about evil, about human nature? That if you were a hollow person, I've heard of shallow people. We know that's not a positive thing. But what would a hollow person be? What are you devoid of? Like, what's he devoid of? He's devoid of emotions. He's devoid of illness. None of the things normal human beings have. He doesn't have any talent. People are just afraid of him. Have you ever met a hollow person? That would be, to me, the scariest person you could imagine. He also calls, I think, one of the guys a papier-mâché Mephistopheles. Did you notice that? Mephistopheles was a devil in Faust. What if you're papier-mâché? Do you remember papier-mâché? I mean, we did that when I was a little kid. You'd make, what's it like? What's papier-mâché like? I mean, if you made something out of it, what would the thing be like if you made it? Papier-mâché.
Papier-mâché is like when you make big things out of, so it's usually like lighter than those things.
Did you say lighter?
Yeah.
Why is it lighter?
Like if you made a rock out of papier-mâché, it doesn't have things in the inside.
It's hollow.
Yes.
So there's again that image. What would a hollow person look like? You ever thought of it? And what's the evil about that? The guy has nothing, has no heart, has no, he can't hurt. He can't be sick. Anyway, you need to keep that in mind. You remember on page 72, the fire? He's still at the central station, and he sleeps on top of his boat. They see us this night, there's a fire. You remember anything about that fire? It's a little thing, but it just fits this pattern. It's on page 72. Did I look it up? Let me see. Page 72, just prove that it's there. He says, I was smoking my pipe quietly by my dismantled steamer and saw them all cutting capers in the light, and their arms lifted high when the stout man with the mustaches came tearing down the river, a tin pail in his hand, assured me that everybody was behaving splendidly, dipped about a quart of water, and tore back again. I noticed there was a hole in the bottom of his pail. Little thing, but how does that fit into this pattern we've noticed? He's trying to fight a fire with a quart of water in a pail that has a hole in it. What is that indicative of in the book? Is he going to be very effective? It's pointless. Again, it's inefficient. It's a picture of everything he sees in these company stations. So I wanted you to keep that in mind. The brickmaker, we mentioned that. What is a pilgrim? He calls these people pilgrims. Who are they? What do they do?
People that travel to distant lands and like discover new things.
Right, these people are any pilgrim.
Any pilgrim.
What would you have to add to that when you say you're taking a pilgrimage? There's got to be what element you have to add to that idea?
Religious.
It's religious. You go to a shrine and you worship. So what is the shrine these pilgrims are worshiping? They're all there to do what? Make money through ivory. They're connected with the company somehow. And yet they wander. That's all. You have these staves, these sticks, and they kind of just. And did you get the one about the El Dorado Exploring Company? I think you could throw them in that category. What were they and what happened to them? Did you get that one right? What? It was the uncle of the manager, right? Anyway, what were they out to do? Yeah. Yeah. Again, ivory. What happened to them? They disappeared. Completely. They found the horses. So again, a pointless expedition, meaningless. And by the way, they were called the El Dorado. What does that mean? What's El Dorado? What?
It's a cartoon.
El Dorado. Seems like it's a SUV too. Yeah.
I think it's either Aztec or Mayan, but it's like the city of gold.
Right. That doesn't exist, and they call them the El Dorado mining expedition, exploration expedition. They don't. It's pointless. Again, it's pointless. So the Pilgrims, Curtis painting. We did that, right? Did we talk about it? What does it represent? It's a woman draped. She has a torch and she's blindfolded. What's odd about that picture?
I feel like it's like the symbolism for knowledge or something like that.
For what?
Knowledge or wisdom.
Well, she's blindfolded and has a torch. What's odd about that? Yeah.
The torch lights the way and she can't see without it.
All right. So how does she represent Europe and imperialism? One of the things we learned about, you may have seen it, that Kurtz was, yes.
Well, I guess maybe she represents imperialism because she's holding the torch because she thinks that she's conquering nations and civilizing them and
Yeah.
helping them, but in reality, she's blind to the fact that she's like taking over these people and just keeping them inferior.
Exactly. That's a big part. You'll get to it. I don't know if she does The White Man's Burden. That's a poem by Adolf. It was almost an adult poem. It was Rudyard Kipling. But he has a really interesting poem about what he saw the purpose of Europe in relation to people color really in Africa and other places. It was their job to civilize them and take the torch. So that was the picture. And here Kurtz gets it right. The one taking the torch is blindfolded, doesn't really realize what she's doing. And one last thing, there are other things here, but I just note, again, I hope you noticed, as you did, about the setting and the plot. I noticed he points out that they're 50 miles from Kurtz, they're 8 miles from Kurtz, they're 1.5 miles from Kurtz. He's very precise as to how far they are, and something happens at each one of those stages. He started off 1,000 miles from Kurtz, then he was 800 miles from Kurtz after he got to the central station. So I think that's significant that he marks and measures it. We're getting closer and closer. It adds to the suspense. Now we're 8 miles. What's going to happen? We still haven't met Kurtz. So we'll do a little of this Monday. There's a lot of detail here that I'd like you to use when we do write about it and have our test about it. So I will, hopefully we'll finish that on Monday. And then next Friday, finish reading the book.